I'm Chase Caridi, and I am incredibly excited to finally present the first episode of the Deep in Sports Thought podcast. Now, this is something I've wanted to start for a very long time. Now, for years, I've been a massive sports fan, and I wanted somewhere where I can just convey all my thoughts about my favorite teams, some of the biggest events in the sports that I follow, and finally, I've started a little something where I'm going to try and do that. So, just a little bit about me. I am an avid New York sports fan, so you'll hear a lot about, see over here, the Mets and baseball, the little all-star flag there. On this side, you could see the Rangers and the Knicks for hockey and basketball, and then finally for football, the only team in New York, the Buffalo Bills. So, of course, that those teams will be heard about a lot on this channel, but I am also going to talk about the best of the best teams, certain rivalries, division races, and of course, playoffs and the championship. And I just hope that you guys can find this interesting. If you have any feedback of what you enjoyed, what you didn't, I'd love some comments and whatnot. And if you do really enjoy it, of course, like and subscribe so that I know that I'm doing something right. So, without further ado, let's just get on to the first topic. So, our first topic of the episode is going to be about what else but the New York Mets in 2023, their disastrous season. And I'm not here to make some crazy claim that despite selling at the deadline, they'll somehow manage to be a team that's competitive this year or makes any big move. I'm not going that insane. But there is a topic of debate in the Mets world right now that people are really back and forth about, which is our next season, the 2024 season for the New York Mets. And a lot of people, after hearing the comments from Max Scherzer after he was traded at the trade deadline, after he said that both Mets general manager Billy Epler and Mets owner Steve Cohen said that 2024 is much more of a transition year and not going to be as competitive as Scherzer would have liked, people are starting to believe that, and people are thinking that it is really 2025 or 26 when all these prospects that were picked up at the trade deadline will come up and be a competitive team in the future. But I am here to say that there is just absolutely no way that 2024 is not going to be a year where they try. It's not going to be a year where they're tanking for a top pick. There's no possible situation that Steve Cohen, the incredibly strong and massive Mets fan that he is, just gives up on his favorite team. He, of course, has seen what the Mets have been in the past when their owners don't give every effort that they possibly can to put a winning team on the field, and it's turned out some very poor Mets seasons. Cohen came in 2021 as after the 2020 shortened COVID year and made some massive moves. He traded for Francisco Lindor. He made some nice small moves like Trevor May and Taijuan Walker, all these pieces that increased the Mets' probability of winning and eventually got them to the playoffs in just his second year as the owner. Of course, that also took the additions of Max Scherzer, some relievers like Adam Ottavino and Joely Rodriguez, and even hitters like Eduardo Escobar, Mark Canha, and Starling Marte. Last season, all of those pieces really worked together to make an incredibly strong 2022 season, one that led the Mets to over 100 wins and a playoff appearance. They lost, of course, in 3 games against the Padres in the Wild Card Series, but there was no doubt for Mets fans that this was not going to be the end-all be-all of the Mets in the playoffs in the near future. Unfortunately, this year it has been anything but prosperous. After a fine April and May, they had a disastrous June, going 17 and 19. And while July maybe picked things up a small bit, the Mets have only won 1 game in August as of Tuesday, August 8th. And that key factor of losing so many pieces at the trade deadline, like everyday outfielders Tommy Pham and Mark Canha, your two aces Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer, and many other pieces that heavily contributed to this team, it unfortunately creates a situation where 2023 is not going to be anything that Mets fans are going to be happy about. A lot of call-ups of younger players, a lot of sloppy play on the field for the next couple of months, and unfortunately for us Mets fans, it's Not going to be the great season that we all hoped for after the end of last. But nevertheless, that should not make us think that 2024 is going to be a repetition of what has happened this year. In 2024, there is going to be much more additions to this team. Steve Cohen has made massive additions, as I've already stated, in the past couple of years. And do I think it's going to be on the scale of a Francisco Lindor trade or re-signing top players like Nimmo and Edwin Diaz, or even taking flyers on players like Kodai Senga, who've been great for the Mets so far? No, I don't think they're going to be that massive. But there are certain pieces on this free agent market that are going to be something that Cohen's going to look at and really find some value in, like Shohei Ohtani. Do they get Ohtani? I don't know. The richest owner in baseball is certainly going to have a deal in order for Ohtani once he reaches the market. I do know that. But even pieces like Julio Urias, a young, nice starting pitcher for the Dodgers who has been in the top three of the rotation at best, which is great. And that would be an awesome addition for the Mets with already a Kodai Senga who's just going to continue growing, and even Jose Quintana, who, after being out for the first couple of months of the season, has had some very nice starts for the Mets as a bright spot in a very dark season so far. Nevertheless, I'll wrap it up with this. Steve Cohen and Billy Epler, while many Mets fans don't necessarily believe that they are doing everything in the right mind of being competitive in the near future, there's not a doubt in my mind that they are still going to try, and that Mets fans shouldn't completely give up on 2024 because it could be a season to remember. Now, besides the Mets, there isn't really a lot to talk about in New York sports right now. Of course, the Yankees have been teetering throughout this season. They've been last place in their division most recently, and they've had some really tough injuries to deal with, like Nestor Cortez, Anthony Rizzo, and of course, Aaron Judge. But despite their season and baseball as a whole, there's not much more in sports to talk about. That is, of course, unless we're talking about one of the most interesting division races in football this upcoming season. As I stated before, I am a massive Buffalo Bills fan. I grew up not really being a fan of football, and it wasn't until about 2018, 2019 that I really got into it, and the Buffalo Bills were just enticed me immediately. I loved the team that was in front of me, the growing Josh Allen, and the nice pieces of Cole Beasley and John Brown helping him out. Safe to say that season wasn't perfect. They would lose in the wild card against the Houston Texans in a game that made me incredibly sad as a young football fan. Nevertheless, the Buffalo Bills this year have grown massively since then. Josh Allen has only developed better, and they've kept adding onto this offense, which makes it undeniable in my mind that the Buffalo Bills will still run the AFC East. Now, I know a lot of both Miami fans and New York Jet fans say a lot about the additions they've made, about the growth of their players, and I'm not going to deny that. The Miami Dolphins, for Tua Tagovailoa, he had an incredible start to his season that was unfortunately ended by many injuries last season, but there's just so much worry right there with Miami, and of course you lose Jalen Ramsey, who you thought was going to be a massive piece of your defense. Miami's still going to be competitive. They made the playoffs just last season. I think they still do have a say in a lot of it and will be very much in contention for the wild card, but definitely not the division. And then there have the New York Jets. And I live in an area of New York where we definitely hear a lot from Jets fans saying, oh, the rookies of the year from last year still developing. There were returning players from injury that will have a huge say on the season. And of course, the biggest move in the offseason, the addition of Aaron Rodgers to the New York Jets. And same for Miami. There is no denying that there is a massive increase in strength of team for the New York Jets now that they are dealing with a veteran of the game, one of the best quarterbacks to ever do it, and still a top 10, top 5 quarterback in the game at his old age now. At least what we presume. There was noticeable regression just last season with Aaron Rodgers, and I simply believe that that is going to be something that we all have to take into account. I don't think Aaron Rodgers will be the MVP that he's been in few seasons ago. This is a new system for him. He does have Nathaniel Hackett once more, but we can't trust that that relationship will immediately stick together like glue. The Jets are going to have to take a little while to really connect through, for Aaron Rodgers to really get to understand, really fully feel comfortable with all of his receivers for game time in the heat of the moment. And that is unfortunate because there are some really tough opponents the Jets have in the beginning of the season. Starting off week 1 Monday Night Football with the Bills, or the next week with the Dallas Cowboys. And even week 4 they have the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. I think these tough matchups with the still developing relationships with Rodgers and all of his pieces is going to cause some real faults in the offensive system for the first real quarter of the season for the New York Jets, and that will prove to be massive in terms of the division and wild card standings overall for the playoffs that the Jets are trying to make for the first time since 2010. And I think we all pretty much understand where the Patriots stand in this division, but I want to talk about my Bills. I've stated that they are growing and developing and helping the top 3 quarterback in the league, Josh Allen, but besides that, their defense is also massive. The addition or the returning Tre'Davious White from his ACL injury, of course, he came back last season, but having him for a full season will prove to be very, very game changing for the defense. Of course, you have the returning safeties of Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. The defensive line, one of the strong suits of this team. The young players like AJ Epineza and Gregory Rousseau, some of the top picks of the Bills in the past couple of seasons, are only proving to be getting better and better. The Bills definitely run a system where they grab a lot of raw prospects, a lot of players who day one might not have the production that us Bills fans really want to see from our defense, but as the years go on and the longer that these players get to really learn from the best of the best and Sean McDermott as defense goes, they're just going to get better and better. And we've seen the increase in production from a Russo and Epineza and the other pieces that just get rotated through. Ed Oliver has been one of the best interior defensive linemen. And that's something that a lot of teams are going to have to take into account, that it's just a very well-rounded defense that is going to be very tough on many quarterbacks, many weeks through. Now, the Buffalo Bills did unfortunately lose middle linebacker Tremaine Edmonds in free agency as he signed a 4-year, $72 million contract with the Chicago Bears. Losing that massive piece in the defense, literally, as he was about 6'5" and 250 pounds, is really unfortunate, as he was able to stretch the field and make tackles in spots where you were just shocked to see that he was being so impactful as a player. They still have Matt Milano on the linebacking side, which, as we saw, was one of the top 100 players in the NFL, voted on by the players. And his veteran mentality and ability to do so much as one of the key contributors in the middle of this defense would really help the smaller, younger pieces in the defense on the defensive line or the linebackers that may just need a little bit more help easing into having a bigger role with Edmonds leaving. I think Milano provides that. I think Hyde and Poyer provide that, and I think Tre'Davious White provides that. For so many young players on this team that the Bills do need to rely on to make a overall well-rounded strong defense, there are still a lot of older veteran players that certainly will do anything they possibly can to help make this defense once again one of the top in the league. Now, before we get to our next segment, we are going to take a look at the forecast for the next couple of days, and for that, I'm going to pass it to here at the Deep in Sports Thought Podcast's weatherman, Cannabis Lectern. Have at it. Thanks, Chase. Well, here in the Big Apple, the New York Mets are finishing their series up against the Chicago Cubs tomorrow, and the worst case scenario for them is they have to put on a little bit more sunblock. When we get to the weekend, though, after the Thursday rain, which they don't have a game on, Friday through Sunday is sunny to just windy and cloudy once again, and middle to high 80s, so you might want to wear some lighter clothing, but nevertheless, it's going to be a nice day at the ballpark. For the Yankees, they're finishing up their series in Chicago, which have some pretty low lows for the summer, but nevertheless, they'll usually deal with a 70 to 80 temperature range, and once again, cloudy to windy in the Windy City. And lastly, the Yanks take on the Miami Marlins, and while these next couple of days are going to be pretty hot down there in Miami, looking over here in the Friday to Sunday column when they do play them, despite the heat, there is not going to be a lot of sun, so no need to scare off for that reason. Thanks, Cannabis. You always know how to do your job. Please always stay safe when experimenting with drugs. So for our last segment of the episode, I am going to do something a little interesting. It is going to be a sports debate about just a topic of mine that I'm going to discuss for maybe 3 to 5 minutes. And if you have any recommendations of current news or sports debates that you may have with your friends, make sure to comment down below, something I can do a little research on and have a debate. But the little twist here is that I am going to pick from this wheel of impressions, and we are going to try and see what little accent or voice I am going to have to do as the other person in the debate with me. So let's see what I get. Oh boy. Okay. I'll see you guys in a couple of moments. All right. You ready?
As I'll ever be.
All right. Well, our first ever debate on the Deep in Sports Thought podcast is going to be about the Knicks versus the Nets in terms of who is going to be more successful in the 2023 season. I'll be on the side of the Knicks and start off with saying, come on, there's no doubt that the New York Knicks are going to be better than the Brooklyn Nets this year. As if you take a look back last year, the star factors of the Knicks is just so much greater. Julius Randle, an All-NBA player. Jalen Brunson, one of the best free agent signings we've seen in a while in terms of taking a flyer on a potential of a guy. And many small role players doing just exactly what they needed to do to make a great team that was top 5 in the East and could have gone pretty far if not for running into the absolute monstrosity that is the playoff Miami Heat.
So what if you ran into the monstrous Miami Heat? You only made it there because you had an easy matchup against the inexperienced Cleveland Cavaliers. Now the Brooklyn Nets, on the other hand, had a very dangerous first opponent against the Philadelphia 76ers, who were easily swept Brooklyn, as they would have with the New York Knicks. If Brooklyn got the same route that the Knicks did, it'd be much easier, and we'd be talking about a deep playoff run by the best of the best, Mikal Bridges.
Now listen, I love me some Mikal Bridges. He's been a great player for the Phoenix Suns and a great player for Brooklyn Nets, and most importantly, a great player for my fantasy basketball team. But he cannot be your number one. He has grown as a scorer since getting to Brooklyn. He's still been a great defender that he's been his entire career, but he's not the number one on a championship team, and clearly not even on a team that could even do that well in the playoffs.
It was their first season as a team together. It's not just Mikal Bridges growing, but also Cameron Johnson, who they re-signed. The role players that mean so much to this team. Nick Claxton being a top center last year and potential defensive player of the year. There is so much for this team to continue growing as they all grow and have great chemistry with one another.
Well, the chemistry between your team can only get you so far. Look at the Toronto Raptors. The connection between DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry was great, but after years and years of failure in the playoffs, they blew it up and they decided to go with Kawhi Leonard. When good for Toronto, they got their championship, but it only took having to get rid of that core and that team that fans had beloved and saw the great chemistry of for so long.
It's funny funny hearing you say that the Brooklyn Nets have this lack of talent, so their chemistry can't really mean anything. When you just look at the Knicks and see, oh, Julius Randle and oh, Jalen Brunson can have all-star caliber seasons and even all NBA caliber seasons, but some of their players can't even show up in the playoffs. Now, I'm not going to deny Jalen Brunson's ability, but you take a look at that number two, Julius Randle. He can't play for anything in the playoffs. He's not nearly the same player, and is a key factor on why they continue to fail and won't be successful as seasons go on with him as the number two.
Yes, Julius Randle has had his problems in the past, from going from one of the top players in MIP in 2021 to a very unfortunate season the year after, and then this most recent one being very successful, but once again, not very much showing up in the playoffs the way we wanted to. You can look at the injuries of him and many other players on the team, like Grimes and Quickly, who had been massive pieces on either the bench or when they made spot starts. That all coming together this season, them healthy and playing to the form that we see them as, is something that is going to take the Knicks a step over than what they've already been. The Knicks have still put up a very competitive team in the past couple of years, and that team being together longer, the coach being together with the team longer, and still making some nice moves to improve, like Dante DiVincenzo in a free agent class that you couldn't really do much with in terms of cap space and really the available talent. Getting a piece that is familiar to your best player, Jalen Brunson, and another key role player, Josh Hart, having all the Nova boys together again really grows the not just connection between all those players, but the connection to the front office, to your whole team's management, and it really helps, like you said, the chemistry. But this is also a chemistry between a lot of great players. It's not just the chemistry between the guy who'd be a number three on a championship team and these other bench players that would be on this championship team, or whatever the hell you want to call the Brooklyn Nets. They can succeed this year. They can go make the playoffs, but there is just no absolute way that with who they have constructed right now can win a championship or even get to the NBA Finals.
It's laughable that you think that the ability of the Knicks to make the playoffs and finals and championship round is so plausible when the Brooklyn Nets can do the exact same thing. For you to laugh off the Brooklyn Nets, but go on this insane tangent on what the Knicks can possibly do, it is astonishing.
The Knicks got very close last season. As I said, the Miami Heat were on a path that no one could see stopping until eventually the Denver Nuggets did it. It took the best team in the NBA to finally put their foot down and stop them. But Boston was made to look like fools in the first couple of games. And even when they got it to seven, still were not in a close or great game in game seven. How they played Milwaukee, beating them in just 5 games. It was shocking to every basketball fan, seeing once again how Jimmy Butler just blew up in the playoffs in a good way, being able to incredibly, exponentially grow his scoring and his defense and just everything about him, just being able to just enhance all the more. And the bench players and smaller pieces that you wouldn't expect to have such a huge role when Butler was off or so. Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, Caleb Martin, all of these guys contributing. That was something that nobody saw coming and, of course, would end up ending the New York Knicks season. Despite that, there were competitive games, and if you had your Sixth Man of the Year candidate, Emmanuel Quickly healthier for longer, Grimes for longer, Julius Randle not being hindered by his injury and also bringing down his playoff performance, I think that series can go a very different way. And I think once again this year, once things line up the way they can, with potentially not seeing Milwaukee, potentially seeing Boston, who they have had success against at certain points in the past couple of seasons, anything's possible, especially when you get to playoff basketball. And so I really do think the Knicks can do it, something that the Nets can only dream of.
All right, I've had it of your cheesy sign-off smile and saying that they're not. It's. I don't care. I'm done. Homie,
All right
homie,
then.
get the car.
Okay,
We're
just
going back to
thank you for
Springfield.
watching
I'm
this
sick of
first
having
segment.
this
I'll probably
debate.
have another outro right after this. Send it right back to you, Chase. That's me. Thanks, Chase. And I want to thank you, viewers, for taking a flyer on me and watching the first episode of this little passion project that I'm trying out. I certainly had a lot of fun making this and would love to keep doing it. As I said before, if you have any critique or anything you've enjoyed more than the rest, please let me know in the comments, as well as liking and subscribing so that I know that to continue working on this and trying to make it the best that I possibly can. But besides that, I'm Chase Carini, and once again, thank you for watching the first installment of the Deep in Sports Thought podcast.